Prime Minister is not going to either of those constituencies next week, which I think is a sign that perhaps they're not expecting to do so well. And certainly MPs have not been sent up to those constituencies either, which is a way of them trying to kind of manage expectations as sort of, we haven't put any resources into it, therefore we're not expecting to win.
There's a big Rishi Sunak interview in the Times today. The Prime Minister says he'll reward people who work hard with tax cuts, and he's told Tory rebels and people who've written him off that he is totally up for the fight. What did you make of the interview?
Well, it's a repetition of what he's been saying for a while now, which is that he's desperate to paint the narrative that we're turning the corner, that the economy is getting better, and that there will be jam tomorrow, and that, obviously we're expecting there to be a significant tax cut in the budget. People are saying to me that they're expecting up to 2p to be taken off tax, which is going to be quite a big commitment, given that the Tories are saying that they're going to sort of max out the headroom in order to give a kind of big budget bonanza ahead of an election. The difficulty for that is I think that could potentially become an attack line for Labour, because they're going to look at this and they're going to think, is maxing out the headroom, given the financial situation that we find ourselves in, really the most responsible thing to do? But look, it was a really positive, upbeat interview by the Prime Minister. There's clearly a message gone round Cabinet and the rest of the party that they shouldn't be talking down the party, they shouldn't be talking down the prospects of electoral victory. And it's almost become news now when a Prime Minister says we can win the election, which I was just thinking to myself today. It's an odd set of circumstances in an election year that we find a Prime Minister, a Cabinet Minister, anybody saying they can win the election and thinking it's news.
Yeah, no, that's quite right. Look, there was a line in there that really bothered me where he said people are going to start to feel better off with tax cuts and with mortgages coming down. And I thought, the reason why that's, and I speak to say this as a heavily indebted mortgage holder, but mortgages coming down won't make me feel better off. It'll just make me feel a bit less worse off, if you see what I mean. Because with mortgages coming, so many people are on long-term deals, and if the mortgage rates come down from being sky high to merely incredibly high, all that means is people roll over. They're still going to get hit hard, but not as hard. And I thought it was just I don't know, does he not get that, or does he just not want to, is he just embrace this narrative of like, hey, Greenfield's ahead, it's all going to get better?
Well, I'm sure Labour politicians would point to the fact that he probably doesn't have a mortgage of his own.
Sort of what I'm driving at.
And, certainly it was interesting to see his sort of tax return published yesterday and the huge wealth that his family have. And that's something, again, that the Labour Party were using to create a divide. The issue, as you say quite correctly, is that people that already have high mortgages are probably tied in for several years to come. And actually, if you look at the deals that are on the high street at the moment, they're still much, much higher than they were just over a year ago.
Yeah.
So it's going to take a long time for people to feel better off, I think, in terms of mortgages. And in terms of tax, the other thing that I would do if I was being a sort of negative and picking holes in what he said, because obviously, any kind of tax cuts, will make a group of people feel better. But actually, the underlying issue is around the fiscal drag. And actually, what Labour, again, would point to is that while they will give money with one hand, actually, if you look at the number of people, including, as we've read so much about, teachers and nurses being dragged into this higher rate of tax, it's not necessarily going to make people, the vast bulk of people feel better off very quickly. And everybody that I speak to who's kind of wildly speculating about what might be in the budget is kind of broadly steering away from the idea that they'll do anything on the fiscal drag because it costs so much money.
Yeah, sure. Sunak, he's got a difficult week coming up. We're likely to be about to tip into sort of an official recession and lots of stuff happening. Is he going to have a tough few days, do you think?
I don't think it's going to be his best week. I mean, there's lots of speculation that actually interest rates could go up, that could happen temporarily. I think actually when I saw some forecasts towards the end of the year, it did look like it was going to be kind of volatile around this time of year before we see a sort of consistent drop as we head towards the autumn. But again, as you said, the GDP figures come out towards the end of the week. That could show that we've tipped into a technical recession. I'm told it's kind of on a knife edge at the moment. People are not quite sure because it literally is it's the difference between a 0.1% growth or minus 1% growth. So it could go either way. And then, of course, we've got those two by-elections, which are looming in Kingswood and Wellingborough. The Prime Minister is not going to either of those constituencies next week, which I think is a sign that perhaps they're not expecting to do so well. And certainly MPs have not been sent up to those constituencies either, which is a way of them trying to kind of manage expectations as sort of, we haven't put any resources into it, therefore we're not expecting to win. I think it's possible that they hold on to Wellingborough. I think Kingswood is pretty much a write-off for them. But that will create a momentum of sort of doom and gloom around the party once again, that they are again not able to win those safe seats. But equally, if the economy is going to be what they fight the election on, having any bad economic news is not going to do well for those electoral fortunes and any expectation that they have of turning things round.
Turning to the other side, Labour, of course, scrapped its £28 billion green spending pledge this week. What's the fallout like there? How much trouble does this sort of put on Keir Starmer? How much anger is there? How much does it affect, say, for example, Ed Miliband, who's at the forefront of climate stuff? What's basically going on there?
Well, I mean, I think the kind of broad picture is, if you actually speak to senior members of the Labour Party, they're glad that they've ripped the plaster. They think that actually the damage of this week is such that it will diminish quite quickly, and actually having sort of got rid of that sort of saddle that was on their backs will actually long term be good for the party. Look, I mean, I think the main sort of question marks over what's happened recently has been management. I mean, it has become the kind of HS2 will they, won't they moment of the Labour Party. It's something that's been sort of dominating the narrative now for months and months and months, and indeed certainly since Christmas. There's been a story about it every week, and I think having the leader of the Labour Party kind of pop up and recommit to the figure only days before they then row back is not helpful, because it makes the party and its senior figures look like they're not quite sure what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I think it also opens up the prospect, which is very much the kind of hole that the Conservatives are trying to drag them into, that they want to paint them as a party without a plan. And I think that although, Rachel Reeves and Sir Keir Starmer are kind of saying, well, we're sticking to the plan, we've just removed the figure, there are now really credible questions about how genuine that plan is if the money's not there to support it.
Do you think, I mean, are there, that you know of, divisions sort of in the Labour Party, high up in the Labour Party about this? Did everyone think it was the right thing to do to junk this?
It's a really good question, because actually I didn't detect as many of the signs as some people have suggested about there being a sort of division between Rachel Reeves and Keir over this. They're usually fairly united in their approach to things. I think it was possible that Rachel sort of led the charge when she realised the kind of long-term effect that it was going to have to continue to kind of commit to this particular figure, and what that was going to mean for their ability to A, paint themselves as a party of fiscal responsibility, but B, not open themselves up to constant attack over kind of borrowing and the tax traps that they're expecting to come. It's quite interesting that they were hoping to kind of announce this just after the budget so they could blame the Conservatives for sort of forcing them into this. So I think there have been kind of robust discussions that have happened behind the scenes, but I don't think that there's kind of been blood on the walls. I don't think that there's been kind of brutal disagreement within them. I think it's just taken some within the party more time to come round to this sort of option. And Ed Miliband's an interesting one. I don't know whether the Conservatives are still maintaining their where is Ed Miliband clock.
He's doing a podcast. He's a busy man.
Yeah, and he's done an interview with the Sunday Times. That was only a couple of weeks ago. But, look, there have been suggestions that Ed was not as happy about it. But you can imagine that, this is his brief. It's also been something he's been incredibly passionate about for years. He's very vocal about his desire to reach net zero. And, this is a blow, whatever way you want to look at it, to those plans. So I imagine that he's not, as pleased as perhaps he could be. But I think he probably understands the broader arguments that are being made by the party and the kind of electoral strategy. At the end of the day, these are grown-ups. They realise the kind of implications of these things. So I'd be quite surprised if he's thrown his toys out of the pram and sort of stomped off.
Do you think, I mean, is there, you said that there was a sort of an ambition to be able to blame this on worsening economic data. Why did they do it now rather than waiting until there had been some sort of major economic, until, for example, if they'd waited until next week when we're in technical recession supposedly? and just had pinned it directly on that and to blame it on the government.
I
Why,
think
why
the
did they
noise had
go when
just
they
got.
did?
I think the noise had just got so loud. I
Right.
mean, when you see papers splashing on the same story or putting it on the front page week after week, day after day, the kind of momentum that builds around it is such that it's very difficult. Given that every time one of your front benchers is out, they get asked the question and they have to reiterate support for that commitment, and it just opens and exposes those individuals, particularly given they probably knew what was coming. So I think that perhaps that was why they did it, so that they didn't have to go through a whole fiscal event when obviously, they will be sitting down on the sofas, they will be doing those big high profile print interviews, and they didn't actually want to have to tell people that they were committed to something that clearly they weren't.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much indeed, Caroline Wheeler. And you can, of course, read Caroline in the Sunday Times tomorrow and all other Sundays.